of a life torn apart. We turn away, but it's happening. The blood's on our hands, on our hearts. What have we done to these children? What do they see? What do they know? Their homes are gone, they're crying, while our taxes fund the show. What's in your head? In your head? Shadows rising, yeah, yeah, yeah. What's in your head? In your head? While our taxes fund the show. What's in your head? In your head? Shadows rising, yeah. They're dying, gas is burning, no denying, and the walls that keep on rising, while the world keeps on lying. They're dying, no more voices, no more crying, what we pay for keep denying, but the truth shining. Action ruins, it's endless, twice torn apart by our greed. Deserts turn to battlegrounds, but who profits from their need? The innocent scream unheard, while missiles strike from the sky. We'll fit the lies that we believe, while the people, they just die. What's in your head? In your head? Shadows rising, yeah, yeah, yeah. What's in your head? In your head? While our taxes fund the show. What's in your head? In your head? Shadows rising, yeah, yeah, yeah. They're dying, guns are burning.
Hello, and good morning out there in streaming land. Thank you for tuning in. You are watching the Ted Manila Information Show, or TMI Show for short, because we bring you way too much information. The Ted is out, as you can see. That is not the Ted. I'm Manila Chan. That is producer Robby. The Ted, I think, is on African safari today.
I actually heard that he is actually on a SpaceX rocket right now going to the moon.
But I thought he just came back from the Jeff Bezos one, the penis-shaped one.
Well, he orbited the planet first. He wanted to see how his system adapted to weightlessness. So now he's actually going to be going to the Sea of Tranquility.
Oh, that sounds fun. Okay, maybe his African safari is once he returns. I
Probably.
think. Yeah, Ted is an international man of mystery. He'll be joining us. I think I looked at the calendar. I think he'll actually be back next Wednesday. So, provided he's not eaten by a lion or something.
No.
So
you're going to be stuck with me a while longer.
So you got a little ways to go. So thanks for sticking around with us. So we are not a straight-laced button-down show, if that's what you're looking for. If you're new to us, this is not it. I try my best not to be so mean, but Robby, not so much.
That's my job.
Robby is less safe for work.
Well, it's not that I'm trying to be mean. I'm just being honest.
No, you're not being right.
There's a deficit of honesty in this country.
That is true. That is true. But I think my years of being on television, it's not that I'm not honest or that I'm dishonest. It's that I know how to curtail my language a little better. And
you're polished. I'm not. I mean,
so there's that.
I mean, that's what it is, I think.
So there's that. So
my wife says I have no filter.
That is true. So I can still say what I want to say, and I can convey it in a less cruel sounding way. That takes practice. So there you are. So we are live Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. Eastern time. So you guys, please be sure to hit the like and follow, subscribe, all of that good stuff so you can help support this little indie channel as we continue to grow and try to fight for actual free speech and truth out there in alternative media, especially as we keep fighting the YouTube censors. I'm just waiting any day now for them to give us another ding to make some invalid, untrue claim against us again. But we'll see. Robby will let us know. Of course, today we'll be talking about this volley of violence happening in South Asia between two nuclear-armed neighbors. Pakistan and India. Our foreign affairs expert on this particular area will be joining us in probably about 10 or 15 minutes. So in the meantime, we've got a couple pieces of news we can cover as we wait for our guest, Robby. So let's go ahead and do some of that before he hops in, because how do you whittle down all the news that's happening right now? So, all right, let's get to it. All right. So first up, this right here. If you guys can make out who that is. That right there is a reformed head chopper.
Yeah, I was about to say that's the Syrian head chopper. He's got a suit now.
He's reformed. He's out of fatigues. He is now in 3-piece suits.
Can he get Zelensky a suit? I mean, if he could get a suit in Syria,
right?
Could he get Zelensky a suit?
Don't know. So let's see why the new Syrian so-called president, Ahmad al-Shara, why he's in a suit. So let me tell you here. Syrian's interim president, Ahmad al-Shara, the former jihadist, reformed, whose forces overthrew the dictatorship, as the West likes to call it, of Bashar al-Assad last December, met on Wednesday with French President Emmanuel Macron. So I guess after Macron hosted his German counterpart, he hosted this guy that you see on your screen. It was al-Shara's first trip to Europe. I don't know if they mean ever, but at least as a dignitary of sorts. So the upside of this, the French president said he is going to push for continued lifting of EU sanctions on Syria, on this guy, if Mr. al-Shara continued on this path of reform.
Well, it makes sense.
Path of reconstruction.
France is famous for the guillotine. So if you have a head chopper, if you're going to industrialize the process and make it just more efficient, I mean, what better place, honestly, is there to go than France? Because the French perfected head chopping. So I can see it.
Is a good point. They do have that in common.
They do.
You're right.
They do.
They have that in common. So Macron says, hey, bro, I will help you out if you continue down this path. You're on the righteous path, my brother. Mm-hmm. Righteous path. We will help you. We will make nice with the rest of the EU on your behalf if you continue walking down this path. And part of that, he says, part of this reform is that al-Shara needs to, as Macron puts it, respect the rights of Syria's religious minorities. He said he'd also lobby the United States to follow suit if Mr. al-Shara continues to play nice with, these ethnic and religious minorities that are all in Syria. The EU in February, of course, began easing these financial restrictions on Damascus. So, this was like around Christmas when Bashar al-Assad was ousted. The goal here, of course, France, along with the regional players like Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Turkey, they favor swift relief from Western sanctions against Syria to speed up the rebuilding and recovery, after the civil war, after, Western intervention, like during the Obama years and Trump's first term. And then, of course, all this mass emigration. And I think what the mainstream news is leaving out is those massive earthquakes that happened like 2 years ago.
I mean,
nobody wanted to help.
Well, it's a good business model. I mean, first you pay to blow a country up, and then you pay to rebuild it. So I mean, you get the double income. I like it. It's a very sustainable business model. Yeah, it works.
It really is. It's like the dentist that cleans your teeth, fixes your cavities, and says, okay, this looks great. Only one cavity. And then when you're done, he's like, here's a box of chocolates. Thank you for being a valued patient. Same type of thing. The U.S. obviously being more cautious, giving Damascus a list of conditions for any sanctions removals that include, here's the trick though, Robby. The U.S. is saying, yeah, maybe we'll work with al-Sharaa, but the list includes you have to ice out Iran. You have to expel these pro-Palestinian groups, expel from Syria, expel anybody that's like pro-Palestinian. And then you have to give the American military basically a free hand, carte blanche in Syria. So the bombshell of this meeting, though, during this meeting, al-Sharaa revealed that Syria had been holding indirect security talks with Israel. Now, that is a big deal because since the fall of Assad, Israel has bombed Syrian military sites for what they say they're expanding this buffer zone into Syria, because obviously it's neighboring a part of northeastern Israel.
If Russia called Eastern Ukraine a buffer zone, would that change the European outlook
Right.
on it? Like, if just to say a buffer zone, I mean, that's not an invasion, right?
Fair. You're bombing to create a buffer zone. If Israel can do it, and that seems reasonable to the West, I guess maybe Russia should use the same language that Bibi Netanyahu uses.
Yeah.
And of course, Israel has continually been conducting airstrikes on behalf, Israel says, on behalf of Syria's Druze minority. So any prospect of an accord with Israel, which is obviously deeply suspicious even still of the new Damascus intentions, that would obviously improve Syria's prospects of becoming sustainable and stable and having some prosperity. But I would caution that. I would couch this as going, let's go back 10 plus years before Obama decided to intervene in Syria in the first place, before Obama's cabinet deemed Bashar al-Assad enemy of the state and started sending U.S. troops there. Syria was fairly stable before the U.S. started funding extremism there to try to ouster Bashar al-Assad in the first place. And then when Trump came in, of course, in 2017 officially, then Trump was like sending more troops there. He kept the Obama doctrine, and then he's like, can we just take the oil? And the U.S. troops are right now, still to this day, on the eastern side of Syria, where that's, of course, what a coincidence, Robby. That's where all the oil fields and the grain fields, the farms, that's where all of that is. And U.S. troops are there. What a coincidence. Just that happens to be where they went.
Yeah, and I'd like to point out that's a violation of law because Congress has never declared war on Syria.
Correct.
We were not invited to be there. So we are in direct violation of American law. So, but again, I mean, if you're creating a buffer zone, I mean, Putin did this all wrong. What he should have said is, I'm going to follow the Kosovo model or the Israel model. I'm not invading. I'm not starting a war. I'm setting up a buffer zone. And if these people are in the way, well, then Putin really kind of screwed up. What he should have said is that the Ukrainians, the Ukrainian government officials in eastern Ukraine, he should have said they were pro-Palestinian, because then he could went in and set up a buffer zone, and he could have established a buffer zone to make eastern Ukraine safe for Israel. I mean, he missed a golden opportunity here.
You just got to use some keywords. It's all marketing. Yeah, it is literally all marketing, because of the way, Netanyahu is couching his bombing of the southwestern portion of Syria. He's couching that as creating a buffer zone for the Druze minority. He is Bibi Netanyahu, the protector of minorities. Yeah. In this case, the Druze minority in Syria. I totally believe that. I totally buy it.
Oh, me too.
Great man.
Great
man.
He would never lie to us. He would never lie to us. He is as
No.
pure as the wind-driven snow.
So this, and of course, this guy, why wouldn't we trust him, Robby? This guy, al-Shara, despite his background, look, we're both Christians on this show right now. Ted's not here. We're both Christians. We both believe in turning the other cheek. We
Sure.
both believe that people should get second chances, and I do believe that people can change. I've witnessed it. I've seen it myself many times over, in my personal life as well as my professional life. I believe people can change.
Of course.
I guess I find it harder to believe that change can happen if you have a long history of violence and, I don't know, jihadism and literally
But he was
cutting
doing it as
people's
a
heads off. But
he was doing it as a freelance.
I'm trying to be Christian about it.
See now though he has an opportunity. He's been promoted. He's no longer a freelance head chopper. So now he's been
Right.
welcomed into the clubs. So now that you're joining Globalist International, we have some certain terms and conditions, and if you abide by these, you be part of the club. You're not going to be Gaddafi'd. You'll be fine.
Fair point.
And don't mess with the Jews, but those pesky Christians who your people killed like 2 weeks ago, that's perfectly fine because they're Christians. Screw them. Just kill all the Christians. That's okay.
And
The Russians will take. No, the Russians will take care of them.
No one is talking about that. The Christian minority and the Jewish minority as well that are in Syria, because Syria was a secular country. Despite the West not liking Bashar al-Assad, they cannot take that part away from him. When he was the president, he ruled in a secular manner, and all these religious minorities were relatively safe.
Syria was the safest country in the Middle East to be a Christian.
Wow, was it?
It was. It's not anymore, but it was.
Sure.
But I mean,
No problem. I won't.
oh, Siri's talking. But that was
She's
weird.
listening again.
Oh yeah, always. I know it is because the NSA is listening to me. I know. If I'm not on a list by now, I'm doing something wrong.
Absolutely, very true. But I did not know that Syria was the safest of the Arab nations for Christians.
Yeah, because they would have Christmas celebrations openly in Damascus, in the capital.
I did see that.
I mean, if you try being a Christian in Saudi Arabia and go and celebrate Christmas and see what happens to you. Do it in Iran, see what happens to you. Do it in Yemen, see what happens to you. In Syria,
I will say,
you can do it.
In the UAE, Christmas is respected. Christians are respected there. Having lived there for several years, I can tell you, I witnessed it firsthand. The UAE was actually very, very good about. Obviously, it's a Muslim majority in the UAE, obviously, but because it's such a huge Western expat hub.
I was about to say, if you're importing hundreds of thousands of Filipinos to be your peasants, then you kind of do what they want you to do.
But a lot of Westerner, the white collar folks from Europe and the United States are all there. So I personally did witness. There were Christmas celebrations, Christmas trees were up. So it's safe there too. But I'm surprised that the West hasn't said too much about protecting the Christian minorities in Syria under this new leadership. And I use that term very loosely because this guy obviously was not elected by anybody.
Sure was. He was elected by Turkey.
He was selected by Turkey.
What's
that
the
is
difference?
a very different proposition than at least putting on the image of having elections.
Manila, this is why YouTube hates you. You are denying the fundamental fact that you can be democratically elected without elections, aka Zelensky. So come on now. Come on.
Fair enough. All right. We're going to leave that topic right there because our guest has entered the studio. So let's go ahead and switch gears and get into our main topic about potentially, I don't know yet if I want to classify it as a hot war. I don't think it's a war yet. It's at least a special military operation. At least. I think we can call it that. I think that's fair. So let's switch gears and bring in our guest. I was a little trigger happy there. But You guys may have already heard, if you're following the news, if you're watching this program, obviously you pay attention to international news. There's a volley of violence. Pakistan's, um, I shouldn't attribute this to the state of Pakistan, but there was at least a terror attack a couple of weeks ago along the Kashmir border on the Indian side, where we saw dozens of Indian tourists and one Nepalese tourist gunned down in a horrific attack in what's effectively this beautiful park region that's kind of like, for Westerners, I would compare it to maybe Niagara Falls. You know, it's on both sides, the Canadian and American border. People were just there being tourists. Pakistan's military spokesman, Lieutenant General Ahmad Sharif, said in this response, after India retaliated in an official capacity the last 36 hours, Pakistan says they shot down several Indian drones flying over major cities just early this morning. The action follows India's recent strikes on multiple targets across Pakistan on Tuesday, marking the most extensive military action that India has taken in at least half a century. India says its actions were in response to that terror attack that was launched out of the Indian territory, or excuse me, the Pakistan territory side of Kashmir. Now, Mr. Sharif accused India of sending 25 Israeli-made drones this morning. He says the Pakistani military shot them all down except one that targeted an airport in Lahore, Pakistan's largest city. One civilian was killed in that attack. The Pakistani deputy prime minister confirmed this morning that national advisors from both countries had been in talks, and they say things are looking positive. So to talk more about that, we are going to bring in somebody I'm very familiar with, and I'm very happy to see again, because it's been a long time. That right there is my dear friend, Sourabh Gupta. He is
How are you, Manila? Good to see you.
I'm so happy to see you, Sourabh. Thank you for joining us. Sourabh is a senior Asia Pacific International Relations and Policy expert at the Institute for China America Studies. Obviously, an expert in this field. Thank you so much for carving out time for us, Sourabh. It's been a long time. If people are familiar with my old shows, Sourabh was a regular on those shows because of his excellence in analysis. I kept inviting him back on because I love the man. Sourabh,
Thank you.
first, can you give us a breakdown of at least a baseline for us to understand if anybody's new to hearing about this region? Can you give us a baseline of why the tensions in Kashmir in the first place?
Okay, this goes back quite a long time in history, about more than 75 years. At the time when India and Pakistan became independent nations, they were under British colonial rule in 1947. The basis on which the countries kind of would apportion each other was, it's the Hindus would more or less stay in India, the Muslim population would be in Pakistan, and it was the princely states. There were kind of the princes, little kingdoms in India also, which the British used to rule, which then had a choice to make as to into which country they would accede to. Now, in most cases, based on geographic contiguity and their demographic profiles in terms of their religious coloration, they chose the logical place they would go to, either Pakistan or India. It was the case of Kashmir, which was a little complicated because Kashmir was led by a princely ruler who was a Hindu in a Muslim majority state. And so it was down to the ruler to make the decision, but on the basis of what should have been, he should have been a trustee for his subjects at that point of time. The ruler dithered over the decision. He wanted his own kingdom and to stay independent, but willy-nilly at the end of the day, under pressure both from British and from the Indians, he chose India. And that did not go down well at that point of time, because that was not in keeping with the will of perhaps many of those in Kashmir. Although that could be up for debate, up for discussion. There were Kashmiri nationalists who were willing to join India because India was deemed to be a secular country in which they could find space, while Pakistan was, their identity was very religion based, while Kashmir had its own kind of nationalism and identity, which had a very strong Muslim coloration too, but also had its own very distinct identity. Anyway, in that kind of, it wasn't absolutely clear if that instrument of accession by that Hindu ruler was done in a fair way, whether he actually did sign it, whether there was coercion involved. But point is, the historical record suggests that he did. That did not go down at the Pakistani end, and India and Pakistan right then, even while they were still under British tutelage, they had become independent states, but their militaries still were kind of led by British generals. They actually fought a war at that point of time. And the point, and I know this is quite a lot of background of 1947, but the fact of the matter is that India and Pakistan still disagree with regard to who of the final status of Kashmir. But India, following that war in 1947, India had kind of de facto control to most of Kashmir, probably 70% of Kashmir, what is Indian Kashmir or Indian administered Kashmir, and the Pakistanis on that's actually not 70, it's less than 70. But India had probably about 60%, but India had the kind of what was the heartland of Kashmir around the Srinagar area. Well, Pakistan had the other part, what is Pakistani administered Kashmir. There's still a strong divergence in views between the two countries. What the two countries do kind of agree on is that Kashmir belongs to one of the two countries. Kashmir doesn't have an independent identity, which the Kashmiris themselves would much prefer. But things have stayed as it is, and you see that dividing line out there, and they've fought multiple wars, and
Yeah.
Kashmir has been a trigger for them.
Well,
And off late, there have been a lot of terrorist incidents now. Yes, go ahead.
Let me ask you, in terms of like the actual geography of it, is there any cultural or religious significance over this plot of land, the way that Muslims and Jews fight over Jerusalem, for example? Is there any major significance to this region, or is this just a fight for land, period?
Fight for land, perhaps more from the Indian standpoint. It goes to the crux of its founding idea that India is a secular land of Hindus and Muslims. It's not a religion dominated polity. While from the Pakistani standpoint, the whole purpose of partition and into independent states was what was then called the two nation theory, which the two nations were one was a Hindu nation, one was an Islamic nation, a Muslim nation. So in both ways, it's kind of goes to the identity of who they were, and India feels very strongly about it simply because this is the only Muslim majority province or state, what they call in India. And so if this is seen to have lost, or India for India, it comes down to how it defines itself. That having been said, what I would say is it obviously isn't a strategic location. That's why I said the land element is also very important, because it obviously abuts China out there, and done in and how and there is geographic contiguity between Pakistan and China. If Kashmir were to fall into Pakistani hands, India has its own border issue with China. It has lost wars with China on that. So, and it has a difficult and strained relationship with China. So, I mean, Kashmir comes right into the mix out there from a strategic standpoint. But the most important one I would say from an ideational standpoint is India's idea that we are a secular nation, Pakistan's idea that it is an Islamic nation, and therefore the final status of Kashmir is unresolved and should be resolved by the people themselves in Kashmir.
Yeah, I have a question for you, Mr. Gupta. It's a pleasure to meet you, by the way. Uh, it's my understanding that the area that borders there around Kashmir, the Pakistani government has loose control, if any control, in that area at all. Is that true? And if it is there any way that that India and Pakistan could work together to try and bring some order to a frontier area that just seems that is potentially lawless?
There, I wouldn't exactly frame it as lawless. I know there are parts of it which are lawless, but the frontier is very porous. It's very mountainous out there. But there are other parts of Pakistan administered Kashmir, particularly the ones which are kind of abutting the northwest, so not India facing as much, which are really more in the law, I wouldn't say lawless category, but are hard for government to enforce its writ, to put it differently. With regard to the India Pakistan, the Kashmir, the border of Indian Kashmir and Pakistan Kashmir, as I said, it can be porous because it is so mountainous, but there's also a massive troop presence out there. And since this process has played itself out on numerous occasions, I think, I mean, from just a standpoint of the amount of troops that are there or paramilitaries that are there, that border can be enforced out there too. The fact of the matter is that from the Pakistani end, they don't have too many cards with which to play their Kashmir, to play to realize their political end goals related to Kashmir. And because I mean the heart of Kashmir, based around the Srinagar area, is falls and where and the falls on the Indian side, and where India is and where India enforces jurisdiction. And frankly, that's also where the recent terrorist attack happened on beautiful meadows in a place which is part of that valley of Kashmir, which is on the Indian side. The Pakistani side is left holding the not the best real estate of Kashmir. And where the Pakistani army or the armed forces role, and the Pakistani armed forces has had a fairly decisive role in the governance of that country. It's not democracy has faltered in Pakistan on many occasions, and in any case, even when there has been democracy in the national security realm, I mean the army's writ, particularly in disputed places like Kashmir, is very significant. And the army has, in its view, has allowed kind of what it would view not necessarily as terrorists, but militants, those fighting for secession or those fighting for a separation of Kashmir of Indian Kashmir from India, has kind of the Pakistani army from time to time has provided either overt support or kind of moral support. And from that standpoint, I don't think there's any trust between the Pakistani and the Indian armies in regards to having a joint modus vivendi with regard to Kashmir. They might have a joint modus vivendi with regard to their long international border, but in that part of where Pakistani Kashmir and Indian Kashmir kind of meet each other, I don't think there's any scope for the two sides to have a kind of a cooperative arrangement where you have cooperative patrolling, policing, enforcement, because the interests are just completely unaligned in that regard.
Gotcha. Another quick question for you, sir. I know that Pakistan has given a significant amount of military equipment, including artillery shells, to Ukraine. Given that has happened, if a war breaks out, I mean, is the Pakistani military in a position to actually fight a war with India? Can they do it?
I think they can do that. First of all, the Pakistanis do have very serious equipment from the Chinese, top-line equipment from the Chinese. So the Pakistani military is not a paper tiger. It is a real military which can fight with sophisticated equipment. We are hearing about these drones. Both sides talking about drone attacks and all. Remember, Pakistan also has good relations with Turkey, and Turkey is kind of one of the world champions in the drone area. And I'm sure they have good drones on their side too, the Pakistanis, just as the Indians have Israeli drones. And I don't know what the state of play is, frankly, over the last 24 hours on this drone issue, but I can completely believe both sides using drones and trying to kind of penetrate each other's. So the Pakistani military is good and ready to fight, but it's not so much about a war breaking out per se, as has been much of the kind of coverage in the media. Reasons are twofold out here. Both of these countries are operating under the nuclear shadow. And the Indian goal has always been, since the nuclearization of both countries in the late 1990s, is to somehow raise the nuclear threshold, that India, if it needs to, can have reprisals or a conventional conflict under that nuclear umbrella. Well, Pakistan's uh, incentives are completely, it's exactly the other, to show that any kind of preemption, deterrence, aggressive action by India will automatically create escalation up the nuclear ladder, and there will be nuclearization of a potential nuclear exchange, employment of a nuclear weapon in some capacity. And India doesn't want that, because it wants to show it's a more responsible power. It doesn't do this sort of cross-border terrorism, etc., etc. But more importantly, India tends to be on the defensive on Kashmir, because it really, the heart and soul of many Kashmiris doesn't really reside in wanting to be part of India. They're because Pakistan has not been a success. They really question whether they'll be any better in Pakistan, but they would much prefer to be independent or have very significant autonomy within India.
Gotcha.
But the point is, India is on the defensive on that front, and what it does not want is an internationalization of the issue. That has been the Indian bottom line right from the 1940s onwards. The first Indian Prime Minister actually took the case to the UN because it was a Pakistani attack on India, and he hoped the UN would kind of play a role in the UN was young at that point, United Nations. This was among the first major issues the United Nations faced, and Jawaharlal Nehru hoped that the UN would come down and take a fair position in calling out who the aggressor was and who the victim was. But the UN kind of, at that point of time, guided by the US and UK, ducked that challenge and said, both parties are just to blame, or both parties we don't care where the blame resides. Both sides need to take responsibility and stand down. And that has been the case ever since, and the UN has. And so there are prevailing Security Council resolutions with regard to Kashmir, which the Indians now detest. And the whole goal of India is not to internationalize that Kashmir cannot get and should not be internationalized. But if we are going to have employment of a potential nuclear weapon out there, it's an obvious case where the international community needs to step in. And so India wants not to let this conflict escalate to an all-out war, because Pakistan would like to escalate then up the nuclear ladder, and so I don't think war is about to break out, but India is trying to carve out more space for conventional attacks under that nuclear shadow. And Pakistan also needs to feel that if it has been attacked by the Indians, at the minimum, it needs to be able to show that deterrence has prevailed by also having reprisals back against India. So I'm expecting a Pakistani attack in some capacity against India, but then both sides at some point of time will stand down with some face-saving intervention by, say, Mr. Rubio or someone else.
Right. Gotcha. So far, we have heard a response. Excuse me. We have heard a response from Pakistani officials making clear that they will respond to India's attacks, and they kind of suggested that you won't know when, you won't know where, but we're gonna respond. And just now, the Pakistani foreign minister, he said that Pakistan has exercised strategic restraint, but this deserves a response. And he still says the state categorically denies any direct attachment or affiliation to the initial terror action that was taken in April that killed the Indian tourists. And he says that we are not going to attack the Indian population. He says we sympathize with the civilian population in India. We will never attack any civilian targets. And last week we also heard the Pakistani foreign minister say that we're taking nukes off the table. So if I don't know how much we can rely on that. I don't know what your opinion is on him. If he's somebody that is, we could take his word and he's reliable and he's, the adult in the room, kind of the way we should take very seriously whatever Sergei Lavrov says, right? I don't know if this foreign minister is the same type of person. Should we take him very seriously at his word that nukes are off the table and Indian civilians should not fear?
I think you should take him at his word. Nukes are off the table is incredible at this point of time in their engagements with each other. I mean, the military engagements with each other. Pakistan also doesn't want to be seen to be brandishing a nuclear weapon on day 2 of an event. Let it go up let the tensions rise up. At some point of time, it will be like we're moving our nuclear stockpile. We're doing certain things with our nuclear weapons. It's not with regard to actually using them, but it's a kind of a threat that is still down the line at some point of time. But here's the important point. I think it's important to remember. I was talking about India trying to carve out space to have some sort of conventional escalation under a nuclear shadow. I think the media has reported this, and it's reported it correctly. This was the first. Let me stand back out here. There have been terrorist incidents with regard to India, which India deems to have come from Pakistan, and on most cases where the evidence has subsequently shown that to be the case immediately or thereafter. In 2001, the Indian Parliament was attacked. In 2008, Mumbai was attacked. 170 people died in Mumbai. There have been smaller incidents in 2016. Once Mr. Modi came into office in 2016, I think there was an Indian base which was attacked, which 19 Indian soldiers lost their life. In 2019, Indian paramilitaries in Kashmir were attacked by a suicide bomber, and now we have this issue. And on each incident, I mean, India has got kind of angrier and angrier, but it has also felt a sense of importance because of the nuclear shadow, which kind of dangles or hovers over the two sides. And as I said, so it's tried to carve out space to do some sort of conventional escalation. And here's where the interesting factoid comes in. After the 2019 strike, Mr. Modi is from the right-wing BJP party, the Nationalist Party. We are more muscular. We're not the guys who just take a hit and just sit silently out there. After the 2019 terrorist attack on the paramilitaries in Kashmir, Indian paramilitaries, Kashmir, 40 lives, etc., were lost. India, for the first time since 1971, did not just cross the international border and attack Pakistan. They did not just hit across from Indian occupied or Indian administered Kashmir and hit Pakistani administered target in Pakistani administered Kashmir, because that border is disputed in Kashmir. For the first time, India crossed the undisputed international border to hit a target in Pakistan, which was in one of those northwest provinces called Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province. So it's kind of out there in kind of that lawless area, slightly lawless area that you were talking about. Mm-hmm. And this time around, on this occasion where India has struck, I don't know how many, 6 places or 9 places or something like that, some of them have been in Pakistani Kashmir. But for the first time, for the second time, it's crossed the international border and hit Pakistan. And for the first time, it's hit targets in Punjab province of Kashmir. Punjab province is kind of the heartland, Punjab province of Pakistan. And Punjab province is kind of the heartland of Pakistan from a political standpoint. So we are seeing India little by little trying to escalate its capability to kind of punish under the nuclear shadow. And it has done so this time. In 2019, once India crossed the border and attacked the Pakistanis came back and again attacked across, not across the international border, but they attacked in Kashmir, crossed the border with their planes and attacked in Kashmir. I am expecting this time around. That's why Pakistan needs to show that it cannot just sit back silently if India crosses the international border and hits Pakistan and carves out more space to do a conventional conflict. This is the calculation on the Pakistani end, that we need to shut that capability down, and that's why they, in my view, Pakistan will attack. It will not cross the international border and attack India. The rest of India as such, it's going to attack somewhere in Kashmir, probably a military target in Kashmir. And this is just as part of this kind of dance of deterrence, but it's a deadly dance, as you can see.
Yes.
And I think at some point we should discuss down the line a little bit about that Indus Water Treaty. It's a treaty which,
Yes.
with regard to water sharing, which has held good since the 1960s, but maybe fraying now, and which has been brought into front and center into this discussion by the Indians, and that adds a much more complex dynamic to the chain of events that are unfolding.
What's the attitude like on the Indian street? Is the average person in India, are they glad to see the government striking back? Or are they kind of, or is there more fear, or is it just more anger? They're just glad to see Modi just taking a swing at Pakistan.
Oh, absolutely. It's the latter. Absolutely. They're just almost angered and thrilled to see that strike back against Pakistan
Really?
on the street. The fact of the matter is that, let me make 2 points. A caveat first, that I mean, Pakistan's behavior for the last 30, 40 years has not been, could have been much better. It has used terrorism as an instrument of state policy, and at the end of the day, over the last 10 years, it has really been bitten in the backside by this, because the terrorists have now turned against many of these terrorists. Non-state actors have started attacking Pakistan themselves in a variety of sectarian and other and local nationalist frameworks. And Pakistan is, frankly, probably at this point of time over the past 10 years, the country that has been worst hit by terrorism. But it's a lot of these terrorists have been nurtured by Pakistan as part of state policy with regard to Afghanistan and with regard to Kashmir. But having made that caveat, I'll say it's a real problem in India, and nobody in India will talk about it, and nobody in the West pulls India up on this, because India is the democratic country and it's supposed to be the counterbalance against China, etc., etc. But that country is reeking of nationalism. It's reeking of nationalism. Its nationalism is run way ahead of that country's competent thinking capabilities and its abilities in the world. And I understand the frustration that is felt out there of Pakistan being able to casually hit India, and India not having many options because of the nuclear shadow. And this is kind of behavior which anywhere else would have been called out. Remember, the Americans have never hauled Pakistan ever to the UN Security Council and passed resolutions against them. The maximum that has happened is there's this Financial Action Task Force, which is a body which deals with kind of drug trafficking and terrorism financing and all, and Pakistan has been blacklisted at times on that. But Pakistan has basically been just kind of wrapped on the knuckles and has never really had to face these sort of consequences the way maybe an Iran has or a Libya has. And Pakistan's behavior has been much worse in terms of proliferating nuclear weapons and doing this sort of supporting cross-border terrorism, etc., etc. So there's real frustration which has boiled over and continues to boil over. And so the Indian, I mean, there's really 9-1 is folks will be supporting Modi, probably almost down to from doorman to minister, frankly. But India does have a real nationalism problem, and I think it needs to really think inwards a little bit how to cool things down and not go off.
Wow,
On
I
the
didn't realize the public support is behind Modi here in taking these retaliatory strikes, and that's kind of what worries me, is that this back and forth volley of violence is where do you stop if you, let's presume that both foreign ministers on both sides both agree and say, okay, no nukes, they're off the table. Why continue these volley of violence in the first place if you know that ultimately you're if the nukes are there as an effective deterrent? How many back and forth volleys should you have, should a state be behind, before that's no longer an effective deterrent, before nukes go back on the table?
Yeah, no, that's a good point you raise. Let me put it this way: the incident has happened. I mean, a horrific incident has happened. India wants to be able to exercise some degree of punishment. I mean, to be seen to be exercising some real degree of punishment. Pakistan wants to be able to be seen to be at least be able a capacity to deter this sort of punishment which comes its way. And from that point on, at least some of the of what was within these countries at least will have been kind of it's they can exhale once again after that. Now, of course, this can create a kind of a spiral which then starts bringing nukes on the table. And that's why here's where the issue of what I talked about, the treaty, the Indus Water Treaty. Now, let me just give you a little bit background out here, because here's where it
I have
also
the
fits
dam.
in.
This is the dam, I
Yeah.
believe, right? This is
Yeah, exactly. The dam. I mean, it's about five rivers which run through Kashmir and then run into Pakistan. Since the 1960s, the Indians and the Pakistanis have a water sharing treaty with regard to those five rivers: three rivers India, two rivers Pakistan, something on those lines, with a bunch of disciplines. It was the World Bank which kind of mediated and is kind of the official, not enforcer, but at least the oversees the treaty in some regards, especially if there are disputes in with regard to the water treaty. Now let me get to the bottom line then, rather than have to then say it in too much detail out here. The India is playing with India has, as I said, India has a lack of options with regard to strike options, because the Pakistani approach is, we are under the nuclear shadow, so what are you going to do about it in terms of being able to punish us? There are limits to it. And what India is now, perhaps, it's the operating thesis is on with regard to suspending and perhaps abrogating the water treaty is, we are the upper riparian state. We are the ones which allow the water to go through. It goes through on the basis of the treaty. But if we scrap the treaty, it doesn't mean the spigot will be turned off the very next day. Water will continue to flow, but it will flow on our terms. And we will be the ones who will determine how much water Pakistan can get. And you, Pakistan, what are you going to do about it now? And so, I mean, it's that sort of dynamic which is settling in. And Pakistan, remember, it's a very water stressed country. It has a huge agricultural population. They need that water. And now India can play around with that. And I think this is one of the few treaties which has kept held in good stead for a long time. But but where this is becoming front and center is that India had already, in the 2000s, started to do certain sort of infrastructure building, which was not necessarily in consonant with the terms of the treaty. And it had gone, there is an arbitration mechanism with regard associated with the treaty. And the arbitrators had basically told India, like, you are within the law, but you are kind of one inch further, and you will be breaking the rules of the water treaty. And in the time since, over the last 15 years, I think India has gone about doing certain infrastructure buildups which are not consistent with the treaty. the Pakistanis have basically hauled the Indians both to a neutral expert on the treaty to adjudicate it, as well as to the Permanent Court of Arbitration in The Hague. And I think my view is that the Indians will probably be losing that case if it is heard fully at The Hague. And therefore, the Indians are using this as a good opportunity. And that case at The Hague is becoming a kind of a forcing mechanism and a good excuse for the Indians to opt out of the treaty, to denounce the treaty, renounce the treaty, and thereafter unilaterally manage water sharing vis-a-vis Pakistan. And just like Pakistan can then challenge India, so what are you going to do about having punishing strikes under a nuclear shadow? India is kind of throwing the same question back. So what are you going to do now, Pakistan, if I start tampering and fooling around with water sharing thing? And so, I mean, it's taking on a very negative dynamic. And one would think, I mean, it's one water basin, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, that Indus Valley basin, regard to water sharing, they need to do it in an integrated way. In fact, developments are going exactly in the opposite direction. And so you see how other factors are being brought in. So it's not, that's why I say it's not automatically going to jump up to the nuclear threshold. There's a lot of other tomfoolery that can happen and is going to happen in between that. And that's how I see the dynamic playing out very negatively.
Yeah, tomfoolery is exactly it, Sourabh, because I feel like there are a lot of egos involved here, and then nobody wants to seem subservient to the other side. And this is where things can get very messy very quickly. So, you know, I'm really hoping that we don't see it get uglier and uglier, and I hope there's, you know, a settlement soon. But to your earlier point, with Pakistan not ever being really held to account, I mean, they housed Osama bin Laden, and they've never, you know, had to face any sort of UN tribunal on it, or, you know, this is no one's ever called that out, and they've made it known to the public, but there's nothing, you know, in a diplomatic manner that has been addressed on Pakistan's not direct support of terrorism, but it's the fact that it's tacit support. By turning your face the other way, it becomes tacit support. And I think a lot of people view this the same way with what happened to the Indian tourists. Very sad at the tourist site. That's awful story. Sourabh Gupta, thank you so much. Always appreciate you coming on, shedding some history on us so we can learn the background, because you have to know the background in order to understand what's happening today. Sourabh Gupta, of course, longtime friend of my old shows and friend of our new show. Sourabh Gupta is a senior Asia Pacific international relations and policy expert at the Institute for China America Studies. Sourabh, is there a website or something that you want to plug where people can read your work or anything like that?
Oh, just go to the ICAS, Institute for China America Studies website. Just do ICAS China, Google search, and you'll be right there.
And you'll be there to find all their studies there. Thank you so much, Sourabh. Always a pleasure to see you.
Thanks, Dave. Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.
Sourabh
Super
is
smart
great.
guy. I like him.
Yeah, all of these people at these institutes, they get paid to think, Robby. That's that's their profession.
That's the kind of job I would like to have. But being a Southerner, I think it could be difficult. So,
one more thing. Well, actually, two more things. All right. So real quick, I want to get to this before we play a clip from our interview we did with Mark Sloboda yesterday. I think this is.
We have an ad real quick if you like for me to do that.
Perfect timing. Let's do that.
It is. That's some great timing. Just one moment here while I get all queued up. Still haven't tried 1775 coffee? Now's your shot. The 1775 starter kit just dropped. Only 1,000 units. You're getting the bold, dark roast that hits harder than a CNN fact check. The smooth medium roast and Vitality mushroom coffee for clean energy and laser focused, no crash. I need some of that. All single origin, small batch, toxin free and mold free. Plus, you're also getting a gold spoon clip because freedom isn't scooped with plastic. a frother strong enough to stir up your coffee and your mother-in-law's political opinions, and a black 1775 tumbler that says, "I don't take life advice or caffeine from a woke sea witch." $170 worth of coffee and gear, yours for $99. This is for the ones who've been watching 1775 below up on Rumble. Wonder if it's actually worth it? Spoiler, it is. Go to 1775coffee.com/studio and grab your starter kit before they're gone. Bold beans, clean fuel, and a morning routine that stands for something, just like Rumble does. Start your day with coffee that actually backs what you believe. Thank you, Rumble.
Very cool. Thank you for that, Rumble. A nice, cool starter kit with a mug and everything. People like merch.
They do. They would be selling if they didn't.
I know. I'm not like I only get merch or tchotchkes if I have to as gifts for other people. I myself am not like a tchotchkes person or like mugs. I have to have something that's like enclosed because it's prone to spilling otherwise, especially when you have a little one in the house.
Oh, yeah.
So there's that. But thank you
There's
for
that.
that, Rumble. All right. So I want to add this in there. I'm going to pop this up there. So as we know, May 8th, I guess it's 8th for us, 9th for Russia because of the time difference. Preparations for their annual Victory Day parade, it's a big thing, are underway. So let me just get to that story here. So Chinese President Xi Jinping has arrived in Moscow on Wednesday. He's going to be there for a 4-day trip, which he'll attend the Kremlin's World War II Victory Day celebrations and aim to bolster this no limits relationship that they have between Russia and China. So Russia-China ties have been deepening significantly in recent years as both leaders prefer a multipolar world to a U.S.-dominated one, obviously. And they share an affection, for certain political views, I should say. They also enjoy a natural symbiosis. Russia sells natural resources, China buys them. And since the war in Ukraine began, Beijing has helped Moscow work themselves through these Western sanctions by supplying Moscow with certain technologies. And so they like, you scratch my back, I scratch yours.
Can we just agree real quick for the sake of our YouTube censors? Community managers. What the China support of Russia is dastardly. It should never have happened. It should be condemned in every way, shape, and form. I'm completely opposed to the fact that the Chinese are helping the Russians stand up against NATO advancement.
Oh, that's right.
Terrible.
Both of these men are dictators and authoritarians.
They are 100%. Okay.
I totally believe all of that I just said.
Absolutely. The jab is safe and effective too.
That too. But the return of President Donald Trump, who has obviously upended global trade, to say the least, and appears to somewhat sympathize with Russia's views on Ukraine. I mean, of course, he dithers back and forth, so it's hard to really nail down what President Trump thinks. But he's making all of this kind of all the more interesting. Beijing, which has obviously clashed with the European Union over trade and tech in recent years, right now, massive tariff fight with the U.S. The Chinese are now actually keen to exploit those European misgivings about Donald Trump in order to repair their ties with Brussels. So, the EU, that's where the EU is based, is in Brussels. So the Chinese are like, oh, we know you don't love us, but we know you hate Donald Trump more. So let's talk. So they're kind of doing that. So standing next to Putin, who obviously most European leaders see as this like cartoonish arch villain because of what's happened in Ukraine, it makes it a little tough. But Putin has this balancing act to consider. Trump offers this prospect of major improvement between U.S.-Russia relations, although not in the last couple of days, I would say. Again, he flip-flops a lot. But better improved U.S.-Russian relations could obviously help Moscow financially. But the White House, we have to remember, is also trying to isolate China economically. So I don't know how this is going to work, because Xi Jinping showing up for it's not like he's showing up for the party, right? Just showing up for the parade itself. Dude is there for 4 days.
Yeah.
So he's hanging out. He's not just there to be like, oh, ceremonial stuff, I'm here, thank you, shake hands, photo op, I'm out. He's there for 4 full days. And they're obviously going to be talking about bilateral relations and how the Chinese, we remember, were actually at the forefront of bringing the war in Ukraine to a close. You remember that period? Like in that first year of the war, it was the Chinese that got the closest to getting the two sides to actually communicate.
Well,
But then Boris Johnson showed up.
Well, China was also the country that helped normalize relations between Saudi Arabia and Iran. So, I mean, it's in their interest for there to be peace. And one thing I got to say, I don't think that the Russians really care about the sanctions. Honestly, I think that I could be wrong. This would be a question to ask for an expert in the field. I think that some kind of an economic package would benefit the United States more, because that we're facing rising inflation, stuff like that here. I don't think the Russians are particularly interested in doing us any favors economically. I think that the economic pain that the American people are feeling here at home, I think that plays into Russia's interest. And I don't see them having any interest at all to try to stabilize global pricing of global markets.
No. I don't think, I mean, I'm not saying as a baseline that Russia is hurting now. They're not. Their GDP has not only been stable, but has gone up, whereas ours is starting to get crunched. But it can't hurt, is I think what that article is trying to say, is it can't hurt for the U.S.-Russia relations to be improved. Obviously, it can't hurt economically, and I agree with that. But meanwhile, while the American consumer gets crunched by the trade tariffs, I foresee Xi Jinping expanding more trade and doing more deals with Russia, because it's on the backs of the American business operations. So I think Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin are strengthening ties. A multipolar world is coming, whether the U.S. wants to be a part of it or not. Right now, the U.S.
it's here.
Obviously,
it's already here.
Yeah, but the U.S. is fighting it, digging its heels in, trying to stick to a 20th century outdated business model that ain't going to work in the 21st century. And this is where we are. So I think having Xi Jinping not only show up for this one event and hanging out for the next 4 days, I think that speaks volumes about the rest of this year and what kind of economic hardship is going to be faced by the Western world, primarily here for us in the United States.
Do you not think that this is more than anything? Because both Vivek Ramaswamy back in the campaign and J.D. Vance both said that it is imperative that we we, the Americans, peel Russia away from China. I think this is China's and Russia's way of saying, go fly a kite, because we see you as the lying dogs that you are. Yep.
Yeah, they're like, we don't need you anymore. Our countries are developed now. I mean, they kind of grew at the same timeline. If we look at, when Vladimir Putin came into power in the early 2000s and Xi Jinping's rise, we can see that over the last, let's just sum it up to 20 years. Over the last 20 years between their two countries, they rose. I mean, Moscow was like a phoenix rising from the ashes in the last 20 years. And China has had this very steadily, fairly steep incline going up in the past 30 years.
Yeah,
right.
But it helped China a whole lot that Bill Clinton and George W. Bush outsourced the entire American industrial sector to them. So there is that. So it was a great deal for China. They got the jobs, we got the homelessness and the drug problems. So I mean, hey, what's not to love?
So there's that. So anyway, let's play a clip. We talked to Mark Sloboda yesterday for our very first Rumble premium content, but we're going to give you a little bit of a teaser. We're going to drop the whole interview either tonight or tomorrow morning, because we're still, learning how the whole program works. But so we'll go ahead and just do that. I'm going to pop this on stage, and in order to not confuse people as to what they're watching, I'm going to the 8th, I'm going to remove our live boxes so people aren't like seeing this 2 versions of Manila and 2 versions of Robby here. So I'm going to go ahead and remove us. I'm going to let you guys have a sample of what Mark Sloboda had to say, at least about these the ceremonies going on in Moscow and in fact other big Russian cities as well. But the big event to mark Victory Day, the big event obviously is in Moscow at Red Square, and there's a lot of very cool imagery coming out of there as they were preparing. Like they do rehearsals, Robby. It's like any other show that you're putting on.
Yep.
You got to do rehearsals. And then the threat. I mean, Mark, we talked to Mark about this. I don't know if we're getting into that at this particular clip, but we talked to Mark about the potential threat that Zelensky says he's gonna, let's go attack Moscow. Yeah, because that's gonna work out really good for you, buddy. That's smart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just
So
dumb.
let's have a listen to Mark. We'll play a few minutes of this, and then we'll let the rest of the content for those premium subscribers, Rumble premium subscribers. Which, if you want to become a Rumble premium subscriber, here's how you do it. At the bottom of this talking head box, if you want to see Mark's interview in full when we drop it tonight or tomorrow, you got to click on that red button below this talking box, below the player. You can become a Rumble premium subscriber right there. It says Rumble Premium in red right below our show title for today. So with that, I'm going to kick me and Robby out and put this video of Mark up in full for you. So let's play it. Mark's Victory Day for Moscow, the Great Patriotic War, which is what it's called in Moscow. In the US, we call it World War II. That's what we're referring to. Moscow's going to host a huge Victory Day parade. They do every single year. Mark, this year, the Immortal Regiment was allowed to march for the first time in 6 years here in DC. This past weekend. That's so we saw a lot of ethnic Russians here in the DC metro, going through the streets carrying signs of their loved ones, their relatives that were, part of the Great Patriotic War. Those are the people that perished. I thought that was a good, promising sign for U.S.-Russia relations, that this is the first time that a permit was given to these people. So I think that's a step in the right direction. But over in Moscow, Victory Day parade celebration plans are underway. We've got footage here of last year's celebration, so people have an idea of just how big this whole event is. Can you tell us, from having lived in Moscow for many, many, many years, what this whole celebration is about, what they do, why they do it, and how big in scope is this whole thing?
Okay, so Robby, Manila, thanks for having me. It's always an honor and a pleasure to be on the Ted Manila Information Show. So first of all, the first thing that came to mind is when you were talking about the parade being held in Washington again, the Immortal Regiment March. For those who don't know, there are 2 separate parades now on the same day. The one is the official military parades, yes, in Moscow, but they're also held all over the country, in every city, and not just in Russia, but in most of the former Soviet Union, it must be said. And then the Immortal Regiment March is it began as an unofficial thing in the last decade. And this is when people whom their loved ones, their family, right? Their parents, their grandparents, their great grandparents, or whatever, people who died or served and have since died in the Red Army in World War II, or other functions that had to do with the war. They march carrying photos, like icons almost, of the loved ones that they have who died or served in that conflict. And in many ways, I actually find that a lot more emotional and compelling a thing. And Putin, by the way, has participated in recent years in the Immortal Regiment March as well. So Victory Day is probably the biggest holiday, the biggest, most important day of the Russian year. You can make an argument for New Year's as well, because New Year's for Russia is New Year's plus the gift-giving traditions of Christmas in the West rolled into one on the same day. All right, so, but certainly one of the two. And certainly politically, it is by far the most important holiday, and that is because of the scale of the Russian involvement and the scale of the Russian loss in what was, let's be honest, largely a Soviet defeat of Nazi Germany in World War II. And for those Zoomers or millennials or whatever who got their history from Saving Private Ryan or something like that, yes, it was the Soviet Union who did by far the lion's share of the work, defeating not only Nazi Germany, but all of its European fascist allies as well, and then turned around and joined the United States in the war against Japan. Although that's celebrated on another day. It's sort of still, of course, to do with World War II. And it was Russian troops that liberated the Manchuria, which at the time was the Japanese Army's industrial base, providing most of their coal and steel and resources as well. So that was a very significant victory there as well in the East. If you read various histories, you'll discover that I think the academic consensus is something like 83% of all German troops that died in World War II died on the Eastern Front. 83%. And practically all of Germany's European fascist allies, bar the Italians, although the Italians also lost a lot of people on the Eastern Front as well. But yeah, the Americans and Brits helped out with the Italians. That was, good job, guys.
Sure.
Mussolini was a huge threat. Anyway, I won't go into that. So the estimates of Russian dead in World War II range from 20 million to 30 million. It is rare to find a family in Russia that did not die, and not just Russia, right? This is across the Soviet Union. And when you said ethnic Russians marching in Washington, D.C., my first thought was, well, not just ethnic Russians, because it was a Soviet victory, and there are probably ethnic people from many of the other different republics of the former Soviet Union.
Fair point.
There as well. You might not recognize them, but we would. So,
well, no, fair point. There are people that look like me that were marching at the Immortal Regiment, right?
Well, those were probably Russians, but maybe not ethnic. Russia, again, I mean, besides the other, the republics of the Soviet Union, Russia has over 200 indigenous ethnicities just within the Russian Federation. So it is an incredibly diverse country, right? Not everyone in Russia looks like me or Robby. A lot of them look more like you. right? And they're Russians. In fact, part of the problem is that in English there's one word, right? Russian ethnic, Russian state. But in the Russian language, there are two words. One word, Ruski, refers to the Russian ethnicity, but Rossiyski refers to Russian citizenship or to the Russian state. And that's why the two words. That's I regard that as a deficit of the English language in properly understanding Russian. But anyway, so biggest holiday of the year. There's a big, the big national event is the parade on Red Square, which includes, all units from all, not just the Russian military, but a lot of other government services as well, and a lot of, shall we say, historical recreationists donning the uniforms and driving the vehicles of World War II as well. Previously, there were a lot of veterans who would march or at least be at the parade. But this is the 80th anniversary, right? Big round year, so it's an important event, and there's just not many veterans left. There's only a handful, and next round number around there probably won't be any. My wife and I, we used to go to Victory Park, which is a park kind of on the outskirts of Moscow, which is a national park just for celebrating, just for remember. I shouldn't say celebrating, just for remembering World War II. And there is a huge amount of military vehicles, Russian, German, Allied, everything, all in great conditions. There are trenches, there are activities, there's a museum, there are monuments. So it's a very big deal. And we used to go there on Victory Day and hand out red flowers, roses or carnations to the veterans when we saw them. As a way of saying thanks. It's a Russian
Show
tradition.
of respect. Yeah.
It's a Soviet tradition, actually. And it was also really wonderful because veterans from all over the Soviet Union used to come there. I remember getting, handing flowers and talking to and getting my picture taken with a veteran from Turkmenistan who came, the hermit state, the real hermit state in the world today. I've certainly never been to Turkmenistan. I'd like to go someday. But I just remember that as being singularly unique. He came all the way to Moscow for Victory Day, long beard, barely able to walk. And that was already, some years ago. But it is emotionally, politically, socially the most important holiday of the Russian year, marked first by the official military parades, and then by later in the day by the Immortal Regiment's march.
All right, so that's just Mark's take on what these parades and all of that means to Russians and former Soviet republics, and why it's such a big deal there, and why so many foreign leaders show up, because obviously Russia has been iced out of all of the commemorations and Victory Day events in Western Europe. They're continually getting wiped out of history by way of soft power. Mark gets into that as well. And then we start talking about, a little bit later in that interview, we start talking about this threat that Zelensky has publicly come out and said that he wants to strike within the heart of Moscow or St. Petersburg on Victory Day, because, nothing shows what side you're on between a war of, freedom and the defeat of Nazism than bombing the Victory Day parade. You know, but who's oh, sorry, I still have you. Sorry, we're still muted. Sorry, there you go.
I mean, Zelensky's nothing if not consistent. I mean, if you're going to have photo ops with your soldiers and have their memorabilia from the side that was fighting the Russians, have to be very careful here. I don't want to offend my YouTube friends. So they are being consistent. My favorite part of the thing was when me and Mark got to geek out about history. That was fun.
That is not my thing that far back in history. But Mark,
was
obviously,
wild.
he's an academic as well as a U.S. Navy veteran as well. But I think he was like a scientist, though, like nuclear or something.
Yeah, but
like
a nuclear engineer on a submarine?
Something like that.
I want to say he was. Yeah, super
I
smart
think,
guy.
I seem to recall. Yeah, very smart brainiac dude. So if you want to hear the rest of what Mark has to say about the actual events right now happening on the ground, whether it's in Kursk or pushing the front line further, what his predictions are about this stuff going on and on and on, you have to become a Rumble Premium subscriber in order to see that full content. We're going to have Mark and a bunch of other great minds like his that will only be available as Rumble Premium content. We can give you small samples, but we have to publish that as Rumble Premium content. So you can go below our talking heads right now, hit that Rumble Premium red button right below, become a premium subscriber, and then you'll be able to have access to not only our content that is spicier, but you'll be able to see everybody else that is a Rumble content creator, see their subscriber only content as
including
well.
mine.
Putinbot has some?
Yes, I am a premium content creator myself. On Rumble. Yes.
So there you go.
Yeah. So if you're a gamer, go check out Putinbot Gaming.
Oh, very cool. Very cool. I didn't know they were doing that even for gaming channels. So that's really cool.
There's a way that I was able to help finagle the TMI show into this.
And we appreciate that.
I've got ways.
Appreciate Rumble. So
I do too.
That's going to do it. We're watching, of course, the breaking news right now. We should actually mention that the trade talks between the U.S. and the U.K., Trump has announced that there is a new trade deal with the U.K. That's his first since coming back to office. And among that deal, I know the British can't wait. The UK must buy $10 billion worth of Boeing planes as part of this deal, because I know they can't wait to have some jets that have doors flying off and
wheels coming off. I mean,
why not?
Yeah.
$10 billion.
Hey, listen.
Refund.
Listen, traveling by air is boring. So anything you can do to spice it up, that always helps. No, you're in this flying tube. You're a couple miles over the air, going a few hundred miles an hour, and then having random parts of the plane falling off. I mean, it's kind of like playing roulette. Is this going to be my day? Is this my day? Because if you happen to be on that kind of a plane, I mean, you
just ain't living.
Well, you might not be living, but also if you do survive the trip, I mean, you'll get the flight for free. Because you'll get refunded for the flight if the door falls off.
Would you ever want to fly again if you were on a Boeing jet where the door just blasts off midair? Like, oh my God.
Manila, you're assuming that people, you're assuming people have a choice. I mean, come on.
I would never fly again. Like if I was, oh my God. I remember when that happened. That was a flight to California. So I know people that knew people that were on that flight. And it is a miracle, Robby, that the door flung off when the seatbelt light was on. So people were buckled in. Like, oh my God, people's phones got sucked out of that Boeing jet. Can you imagine, like, if a person got sucked out, a child got sucked out? Oh my God, that just
it'd be a fantastic view on the way down.
Terrifies the daylights out of me. I'm not afraid to fly, but when you report on enough Boeing disasters in my career, like me, I don't think that's a great deal for the UK that
Why
Keir
you
Starmer agreed to this deal that we're going to buy $10 billion worth of Boeing planes.
why are you being so anti-American? I don't understand this. This is why you're hated and banned. It's because you should be celebrating this. Manila, this is a chance to spice up air travel, not only here domestically, but internationally on an
I
international scale.
appreciate your spin.
I mean,
do.
you
I
can
really
do this. I mean, it is our duty as patriotic Americans to not build high-speed rail because bombs are needed to kill Palestinians, and then we can fly with substandard airplanes held together by duct tape and prayers. I do not see the problem with this.
We have a quality control problem in the United States, and but whatever. Keir Starmer signed the deal, so buyer beware. Whatever.
Yeah,
Whatever.
More power to them.
I prefer myself riding on Airbus. I mean, I literally look at before I book the particular route that I'm going to fly, what carrier uses what jet.
But with the
And
trade war, is that even an option anymore? I mean, honestly,
I
honest
know,
question.
but I literally I look at that because I greatly prefer an Airbus jet, which is primarily made by the French. I primarily fly on Airbus because I will not.
I bet you have a foreign car, don't you?
I do.
You hate America. How dare you?
I must.
You should be
I
deported.
must. I drive a Japanese car now.
Shame
Used to have
on
a
you.
German car. Now I have a Japanese car.
Y'all heard it here first.
That's right. I do not have a Ford or a GM. I drive a Japanese car because, reliability. So there you go. But I think this is what we're going to have to break down tomorrow is what kind of a deal did Keir Starmer just stumble into?
He
with
got
the
the one
United
that Trump. I can answer that question right now. He accepted the one that Trump gave him. I mean, seriously,
I'm sure.
What option does he have? Britain used to be called Great Britain. Now it's called Britain or England. It's no longer great.
I know.
So, I mean, it will do as it is told, just like the Germans do. They lost their balls at the end of World War II. They mortgaged them to Uncle Sam. They will do as they're told, like the good, obedient little bitches that they are, until they're not.
Yikes. Tell us what you really think. All right. We'll leave that there. I guess that's going to be one of the main topics tomorrow is now that the deal has been released, it's been signed, Keir Starmer inked it.
Yep.
It's a deal. That's what we got to cover tomorrow and see what it is. If are the Brits getting wonderful American chlorinated chicken, as George Galloway used to always tell me? We know now the Brits are going to be flying on good old American Boeing jets. Woo! And let's see what else.
Listen, if you're stuck out of planes, you have to worry about cancer. I mean, look at the bright side. Manila, listen, you're always so pessimistic. Look at the silver lining. That it might be the door coming off the plane, but it's there. There is light at the end of the tunnel.
Oh man, I can't wait to look and see what is a part of this deal. And I don't know what America is buying from the UK.
Nothing.
But
nothing.
You're probably right. Yeah. I think this deal is probably heavily slanted towards the UK being the consumer, the buyer of American stuff, and because that's it. We're in a Trump world. So curious to see what it looks like. So we'll talk about that tomorrow.
Yeah, sounds good.
Sounds good. All right, guys. Thank you for tuning in. Remember to hit the like and the subscribe button if you're not in the position to become a Rumble Premium subscriber, so you can at least help support the show so we can continue to do more of this for you. But if you want to see all the spicy talk with some of our premium guests, you have to become a Rumble Premium subscriber. All right, guys. Have a great day. We'll see you. We're almost at Friday because we're just working for the weekend, y'all. Have a good Thursday. We'll see you tomorrow. Adios,
Bye-bye, y'all.
amigos. Thank you. Bye.